If, for instance, Silicon Valley is suddenly interested in pronatalism, if they're interested in having a future at all, it's the family that creates the next generation, which makes the future. But if human beings are not there to witness it, to make it, to act in it, the future doesn't happen. It's the end.
Well, welcome to Undercurrents, our daily news show from Unheard's Washington Bureau. Today's guest is Michael Toscano. Subscribe here, wherever you get your podcasts, and over at undercurrents.tv, you can join the Undercurrents community. It's just $1 for your first month. You get special access to an email address where you can ask me questions, and we do premium paywalled episodes at least once a week. So let's get to the news today. Back in the first Trump administration, when frustration with social media started to grow among teenagers and parents, conservatives capitalized on that anger to mount a full scale assault on an industry that held both significant control and significant ideological bias in Silicon Valley. The right started to seriously reconsider something kind of wonky called the consumer welfare standard, a philosophy of antitrust policy that big tech's exploitive conduct was testing. And all that is to say, conservative anger at big tech was channeled into major significant reconsiderations of corporate power. So the question now, as we've said on this show, is whether all of those oligarchic tech CEOs sitting behind Donald Trump at his inauguration have been conquered by Trump's Republican Party, or whether Trump and the Republican Party have been conquered by them. Will Trump and Republicans let powerful tech companies run wild, abusing monopoly power to put profits over the public's well being? A group of high profile conservative intellectuals, including Kevin Roberts, Robbie George, Patrick Deneen, Christine Rosen, Al Mohler, Mary Harrington, and many more, published a letter in First Things on January 29th that I think is really important. It outlines their idea of a moral framework for tech policy. Technology, they say, is meant to empower the human person. We have seen, however, that if left ungoverned, technological advancement too easily comes to hinder human flourishing and threatens the human person and the family. One of the authors of that letter, Michael Toscano, the executive director of the Institute for Family Studies, joins us here on Undercurrents now to work through what's happening on the right in a time when tech CEOs are spending days here in DC lobbying the new conservative Republican administration. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, you're one of the very smart people behind this Future for the Family, a new technology agenda for the right, which I think is fascinating and a very worthwhile effort. I just want to start by asking you to tell our audience a little bit about the genesis of this agenda and what you're trying to say with it.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned that I'm one of the people on it. I should commend my co-authors as perhaps being the more brilliant and the more inspiring. But it is very much so a group effort. And what spurred it was a conversation as many as 2 years ago, in which several of us were looking at some of the promises for technological change that were coming down. And we were wondering if it were possible to set an agenda for the Republican Party to be more responsive to it, to be able to guide it in what we hoped would be a positive direction. And by positive direction, we mean quite specifically things that respect human nature, but then more so empower families. Several of us have been involved with a number of campaigns to get policymakers in states around the country to adopt laws to require age verification for pornography or age verification for social media, or to get smartphones out of schools. And it occurred to us that, however important these efforts were, that there was a much broader set of challenges that were on the horizon these that these legislative actions were not suitable for, and that it was possible for us, given our successes, to try to apply some of these policy tools into a broader suite of issues that are arising as a result of technological change.
Yeah, and there was a moment on the right where we all, I don't know, 5+ years ago started having this conversation about antitrust and about how big tech was not just abusing some of the free enterprise system, but was doing it in ways that were culturally detrimental. This wasn't just sort of an economic roadblock, but it was having cultural consequences downstream. And now we see some of those folks behind the dais at Donald Trump's inauguration, and this is kind of the obvious question: is the coalition in as good of shape as it was before these, I guess, new bonds started to form? Do you worry that the coalition is now weakened, or in a way, has Donald Trump sort of conquered the people that need to make some of these very high level decisions?
That's the most important question of all. And we're hoping to motivate things in a certain direction to result in a certain answer. It's clear, as you said, that there was a lot of work being done on the question of what to do about big tech more broadly than child safety. It's
Hmm.
the effect on economics, culture, politics, and it was obvious what to do when these threats were emanating from Silicon Valley, when
Hmm.
they were aligned with a specific political party. But now it's not clear that there's one party that is home to big tech, and it's not clear as well that the opposition is the other.
Hmm.
So now, what's to be done now that it's a requirement to govern together with many of those whom were advancing certain technological changes that were seen broadly as threats to our culture? And our hope is that by putting out a statement like this, that we could plant a flag in the ground and say, look, there are opportunities for us to work together, and those are technologies developed specifically for the empowerment of families,
Hmm.
and other substantive goods that we could work on together. But in order for us to get there, there have to be lines that we do not cross. And so I think what we're headed for, hopefully, is a kind of coalitional negotiation where we find out what are the areas where we can that we can agree upon, and what are the areas where we can decide at least to have some kind of peace on.
Hmm.
And even more positive than that would be, are there areas where technological development could be advanced in order to achieve the goals of stronger families? And we think that there are ways in which that can be done.
Yeah, so that's a very important point because it's extremely tempting right now to be a sort of a no tech absolutist, to universally say we're going full Unabomber, moving to the woods, and I say that jokingly, but it's a very tempting thing in the age of, as you write about, deepfakes, AI sexual companions, and sex robots. I mean, it's so absurd that it's
Yeah.
tempting to throw it all out. But you start with a line that I thought was really well written. A new era of technological change is upon us. A change is upon us. It threatens to supplant the human person and make the family functionally and biologically unnecessary. And I really wanted to ask you about that launching point, Michael, because what worries me is that we can all kind of go through this 10-year period of anguish over men and women being told that sex is interchangeable, and we can come out on the other side of it, as Abigail Schreier has written recently, and look back and say, oh my gosh, that was awful and silly, and we were in a moral panic. But what worries me is that I think that came from that was a symptom of a much deeper disease, which is that we've been conditioned to believe it's okay to have technology that supplants the human person and makes the family functionally and biologically unnecessary. Is that do you share that concern, Michael?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, it's the opening line of our statement. I think that the story of technology unbound uh, uh, is is the story of us not applying our wisdom, our powers of collective action, our rights over the way that technology shapes our lives. And as long as we don't do that, technology is going to be used to exploit vulnerabilities, to try to find easy scores, to try to use us as raw material for commodification of all different kinds. And what we need to be doing is challenging technology to think bigger, to dream higher. And the way to do that is to say you're concentrating on things that are easy, technically difficult, of course, but they're easy parts of human nature to exploit. And so we think right now that a broader view of the challenge requires us to see that the laissez-faire approach to technological change is one of the reasons why technology is run amok. It's not the nature of technology to run amok. These are creations of human beings. They're engineered by us politically and culturally and technically and scientifically. It's the fact that they are in opposition to us is a sign of, first of all, an opportunity to make adjustments and changes, but that something is fundamentally amiss in the system, not necessarily fundamentally amiss firstly with technology. If we can use politics to try and strike so to speak, a new deal where we both political parties can say, okay, let's use this for good. But these are the kinds of things that are easy scores, easy marks, and we're not going to let you go there. And that's, obviously the exploitation of children. And so we think that there's an opportunity to energize technology in a much more positive direction.
Are you ready to jumpstart your health in 2025? Meet Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. Lumen is a small, cutting-edge device that measures your metabolism through your breath. So interesting. Using the Lumen app, you'll learn whether your body is burning fat or carbs at any given moment. But it doesn't stop there. Lumen provides tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. And it's easy. Just breathe in your Lumen each morning to see what your metabolism needs. Then get a daily nutrition plan that is tailored to you. You can also check in before and after meals or workouts for real-time tips to stay on track. Your metabolism is your body's engine, and keeping it healthy means better energy, fitness, sleep, and weight management. Lumen even adjusts to hormonal changes like your cycle or menopause so you can maintain balance and feel your best. Take control of your health this year. Visit lumen.me/undercurrents for 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/undercurrents for 20% off. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Okay, so that's interesting. Is it almost that focusing on children is the starting point in order to, as you were saying, kind of make these collaborations happening? So we can focus first on children. If you can make the pitch about how something is harming children, TikTok, pornography access online, then maybe that's a building block, a foundation to go and say, okay, so if this is a problem for children, then maybe it's also corrosive to the mental well-being of an adult and it's addicting or something like that. Is that sort of the idea, Michael?
Yes, and I think the main idea is that having allowed, to take a step back a little bit, there's a story in one of Plato's dialogues, the Phaedrus, where an inventor comes to the king of Upper Egypt, and he presents the king with all of these inventions that he has, and the king surveys them and says, "Wow, these are wonderful." But he points to one in particular and says, "But you cannot use that one because it will harm my people." And what has happened is that this idea of there being some kind of authority, some politics, which says in the main yes, but in certain instances no. What's end up happening is that we've allowed technology to concentrate on things that are frankly immoral. Where in a Republican form of government, is it possible to imagine a politics where the political parties basically do that work, where we say, okay, this is all great, but this over here, I'm sorry, you can't do. And obviously, we've all been galvanized over the last so many years over the effect that social media companies have had on kids and smartphones. Jonathan Haidt has obviously accelerated a lot of this conversation. Jean Twenge, who works very
Hmm.
closely with my organization, the Institute for Family Studies.
You and Claire
But
Morrell,
one of the effects
absolutely.
of that has been, and I'm not used to praising Meta, but I think this is an opportune time to do it. Because of Meta's realization that regulation is coming, what they've actually done is they've volunteered to put forward what I consider the very first effort at serious parental controls.
Huh.
Everything else before this has been window dressing. And they've even on their own have volunteered to implement certain forms of age verification that enable parents to have much more authority of what their kids see on meta platforms over and who they interact with. And this would not have happened if it were not for our successes both in the states and the threat of federal legislation. The objective of these companies is to make money through technological products, and that guides them towards that steers them toward targets that can easily that are exploitative of addiction and other vices. But if we say no to that, then that will spur innovation, that will spur collaboration, and we think that yes, that's a prime example of how politics can guide things in a much more productive direction. And this is just the beginning. There are a number of instances where politics could be brought to bear to make technology our friend and not our foe.
So I want to ask this question in a way that's not leading, just so that you know it's genuine and sincere. But I wonder if a secular society can agree to to look at technology as something that should not, quote, supplant the human person, and for which the family should be the primary constituency of technological advancement. Is it? Why should a secular society agree to that if the human person isn't, I guess, sacred, if the kind of the fundamental capacities of the human person are not sacred?
It should agree with it because its future depends upon it.
Mm,
The family and the human person, the family in particular, as we put it in our statement, the family generates society,
mm,
and a culture of healthy families is an indispensable condition of social health.
mm,
So if for instance Silicon Valley is suddenly interested in pronatalism, if they're interested in having a future at all,
mm,
it's the family that creates the next generation, which makes the future. We can think of the future as something as just the marching of time. But if human beings are not there to witness it, to make it, to act in it, the future doesn't happen. It's the end. And so we think that on a deeply on a level of our collective dreams,
mm.
that things are in ways that may be invisible to most people, but things are aligning in such a way where actually it turns out that the family may be the most uh, may be best positioned to be the organizing principle of our technological order, because technology as the things we invent so we can make life better, but also so that way we can have a brighter future, is nothing. Technology does not advance. Technology has no witnesses, no agents,
Hmm.
if there is no family, if there's no human person. So I think many of the transhumanist dreams are just incoherent. They're not just barbaric, they're incoherent. The future does not exist without the family. And so we think that it's possible with Silicon Valley now, in many cases, shifting in our direction, at least politically, but also finding this great urge to see more human beings to be witnesses and agents in the future, that it's only a matter of time before it realizes that the family is actually the thing that can bring all those things together.
Yeah, and I know this isn't directly related. I mean, I think it is related to the question of family, but in a more indirect sense. To me, the big question is just like, how do you explain to somebody why they shouldn't die? If we can find a way to, cryogenically freeze ourselves indefinitely, To me, that seems like something that would be enormously damaging to family and to the future of humanity, and fundamentally alter our relationships with each other and the universe. But the question that it seems to that just to me seems like a good example of a question that has many other questions sort of stacked under it, like the Russian nesting doll. And if we can't, answer that question, I mean, I have an answer to that question as a person of faith, and I know you do too, Michael. But like, I don't know that as a society we're in a place where we can find consensus on that point.
Yeah, well, and that's what politics are for, right? You don't need
Hmm.
consensus with everyone. Um,
Mm.
and so it may be true that there are some in Silicon Valley that spend an extraordinary amount of resources trying to hack the human person, as some of my colleagues have put it in essays that they have written, or if they try to elongate life beyond what is reasonable or natural, or prolong life forever. In this case, I think that they will fail at that, and I think there's probably a realization as well. There's a broad civilizational realization right now that the dream of engineering foreverness is probably impossible. I mean, the mortality rate is going down, where it seems like we're getting less and less control over the human body and over human sickness. And in fact, right now, the major civilizational shift is toward more natural remedies, as is expressed by the MAGA movement. I think that dream is going to be revealed as very tired, and I think they will find themselves very lonely. Right now, the shift is away from that in very in very large ways. So I think that on that point, that dream is starting to ring hollow, increasingly in Silicon Valley as well. Um, and so a split Silicon Valley is a much more manageable Silicon Valley. A Silicon Valley which is in a culture war with itself is one that can be that certain powerful interests there can be rallied to your position. And I think that we're in a much better spot, to put the transhumanists basically into a position of cultural irrelevancy for at least quite some time. Now, it may not appear that way because right now all of these technologies are emerging, which seem to indicate otherwise. But there are civilizational reactions right now which are so strong, that it's just not clear to me that that dream really has the upper hand. Um, so so we'll see. But we're going to make an effort, to make that to expose that dream for the shallow dream that it is.
Well, of course, I have to ask about the Elon Musk of it all, because he's a complicated
Yeah,
person who maybe gets
yeah,
sometimes flattened. A pro-natalist who also is behind Neuralink, somebody who's
yeah.
very into
Yeah.
AI but was feuding with Sam Altman over taking it for profit. So, Michael, how should he's actually sort of the culture war that's happening in Silicon Valley. Silicon
It's
Valley's at
happening. The culture war in Silicon Valley runs through every Elon Musk's heart.
yes, it's him. That is it distilled into one person. To borrow your
Yeah,
excellent description. So, now that he is maybe the second most powerful person in the country, he's potentially the most powerful man in the world. But he is,
mhm.
clearly taking an enormous role in the United States government, for better or for worse. How should people who say these inventions should have their primary constituency to be the family, to be humanity? How should people look at Elon Musk? How should people? What should we expect from Elon Musk? What should we think of him?
Yeah, we should first of all, as you've described him perfectly well, but we should recognize that he's technical genius.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and we need to realize that not only is he a technical genius, but he is a massive cultural power.
mm,
Um, he reminds me of this figure in Hannah Arendt's classic book, The Human Condition. She
mm,
writes about Homo faber, man the worker, man the maker. And she spends the first 100 pages or so admiring these figures, but then the next 100 or so is about the risks of allowing them to just make on end to the point where nature does not exist anymore. And the crux of of many of our political crises actually is, I think, in an Arendtian fashion, is that Homo faber has been allowed to make without politics directing.
Hmm.
Now, it becomes much more complicated when Homo faber is in the White House, and when Homo faber is the philosopher, when Homo faber is the king, is the governor. So I think I'm not going to deny that there's an extraordinary challenge here. And part of it is really that we really want to see Elon Musk helping us get to space. What we don't want is Neuralink to hack our brains so that way we could have direct democracy on Mars. So I think what we need to do is we need to be very clear that there are areas of collaboration and that there are areas of disagreement, and we on those areas of collaboration we be very generous, and on areas of disagreement we don't budge. But I'm hoping that the fact that the Republican Party is a coalition which contains more than just technological interests,
Hmm.
that perhaps the need to keep multiple constituencies happy will also have a slowing effect. You can see this with the way that Trump has tried to deal fairly in his mind with Silicon Valley and labor at the same time,
Mm.
where he has come out in favor of the longshoremen who struck an extraordinary bargain, which got basically the whole world hissing. But he said that automation is it is not a tool to be used for the taking of jobs of working people. And he also said the exact same thing with the electric vehicle mandate, that he called it in his inaugural address, he called it a sacred pact that he had with the auto workers. And Trump, I think his instincts here are ones that we should pay very close attention to, because what he is saying is effectively there are things you can do and there are things that you cannot do. And more than that, he's saying there are things that I will try to put resources behind, extraordinary sums, $500 billion or whatever it might be, or supportive of Stargate. I know that's not going to come from the federal government, but he was lauding that project, to get basically AI infrastructure in place at a huge expense. But then he said afterward, and uh, this will immediately create 100,000 jobs at least. So Trump is trying to balance these interests against each other. What we're saying is that there's a third interest here that also should be added to the balance. And we think that if the Republican coalition can hear what we're saying, and if they can advance our agenda, then we could have a seat at the table, and we could try to get our voices heard. And we could add another voice to this new treaty, in a sense, that Trump is trying to effect between capital and labor. So yeah, so you're right that the challenge is extraordinarily difficult, but early evidence suggests that it's not Elon Musk unbound at this point.
So interesting. Michael Toscano, thank you for your time and for your work on this.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for tuning into today's edition of Undercurrents. As a reminder, if you go over to undercurrents.tv, it's $1 for your first month of a premium membership where you can join the Undercurrents community. You get a special email account, which allows you to send questions to us. I love answering questions. And we do a premium paywall episode for subscribers only once a week. So you get an extra edition of the show as well. Please make sure to subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate it so much. We appreciate you tuning in. These conversations are so invigorating. I know that might sound weird and make me look like a loser, but they are really, really interesting, because it's a time right now when Democrats are sort of left looking around, trying to figure out what their agenda should be, what their messaging should be as well. And Republicans just spent kind of 4 years doing this and are now grappling with how to use the levers of power. So right now, I mean, things are, it just feels very, what's the right word for it? It feels very lively here in Washington. So to have some of these conversations on the most, I think 30,000 foot abstract philosophical level, and watch all of that sort of trickle down into policy discussions, whether on the left or the right. Just fascinating right now. So we thank Michael for being here and for being willing to talk through some of this. So thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with more Undercurrents soon.